My name is Angie, and this is the story I wasn't supposed to find.
And I'm our sister, Cindy. We started this podcast with one name, Stella Smith, our great-grandmother, a woman who gave up 2 daughters, disappeared from history, and left behind almost nothing.
No photos, no grave, no explanation, just a blank space where a person should have been.
Until a DNA test changed everything. Turns out, Stella Smith wasn't even her real name.
Her name was Estrella Suarez. She came to America from Spain as a child. She married twice, left 2 families, and somehow managed to vanish not once, but twice from history.
In season 1, we found Estrella's beginnings in America. We found family we didn't know existed. We sat across a table from cousins who'd been looking for the same woman we had from the other direction. And we thought we were closing a chapter.
We were wrong.
Because season 2 is where things get even more complicated and even more personal. New relatives surface, new documents turn up, and some of the answers we finally found led to questions we'd never thought to ask.
This is Buried Threads, a podcast about family secrets, silence, reinvention, and what happens when the past refuses to stay buried.
Last season, our final documented record of Estrella was in 1937, where she was working at the estate of Etta Montgomery in Springfield. And we really didn't know what happened to her after that. But then a close DNA match named Ryan Walters led us to his mother, Terry. And Terry's father, Edward Nelson, was the son of a woman named Wilma Estelle Nelson. And Wilma Estelle Nelson was Estrella, was Stella. And if you want to hear all the details of the story, you're going to want to go back and listen to the episodes in season 1. But this is where we're picking up today.
This means that after nearly a century of searching, we have finally found her. And today we sit down with Terry, Edward's daughter, Estrella's granddaughter, my mom's first cousin, to hear what she knew, what she's learning, and what all of this means for her family. Terry, we want to say first, and we mean this sincerely, thank you for being here. We know that this has been a lot of information to be thrown at you. It has challenged, what you know and what you understand about some of the details about your family and about growing up, about your grandmother. We know this has been difficult and also interesting, all of the things together. But the fact that you've chosen to sit down with us says a lot about who you are. And we're honored, and we don't take that lightly, as we're going to dig in and ask you all kinds of questions about your family.
It's been my pleasure.
So before we get into the history and the research, can you just introduce yourself in your own words? Who are you and where are you from?
Terry Lou, and from Galesburg, Illinois, currently residing in Clinton, Iowa.
Like neighbors, it's so close. That's just mind-blowing to me. Just right down the road. So your dad, Edward, we want to give him a proper introduction because he matters very much in this story. Who was Edward Nelson to the people who loved him?
Dad was kind of a quiet guy, always thinking, very intuitive, just a great father, great role model.
Love that.
And what did he do for a living?
He was in the Marine Corps at first. He came back to Galesburg and was a welder for quite some time and decided then that he wanted to follow his passion. He went into law enforcement and he climbed the ranks there and did a phenomenal job.
Yeah. Well, isn't that an interesting piece of the story? That is so interesting. So you told us that your dad quietly spent years, and maybe not quietly, but he spent years investigating his mother's past. What do you remember about that? Did he ever talk to you about it? Was it something that you only knew in hindsight, or were you aware of it at the time?
I remember a little bit of him speaking to my mom about it. Grandma would take off and go to Springfield quite often, and Dad always wondered why. And so when he came in law enforcement, he had the tools to do some research himself. And so he did travel there. Kind of came up with some dead ends at the time. But later in life, I also remember asking my mom about it again just to try to solidify the story a little bit. And there really was no more to the story at that point in time. He met with some dead ends there. He hired a private investigator to go and still no luck.
Yeah. That's interesting.
It's very interesting to our ears to hear when you said that your grandmother visited Springfield regularly. You know, our ears perk up immediately and we were like,
Yes.
what? It was Springfield.
Yes.
Right.
We know Springfield.
Right. Well, it just it becomes
Yes.
interesting to wonder what was she doing in Springfield? And obviously she did live there a long time before she married and started her other family. But it's interesting that she was coming back. That's just a very interesting idea to explore. What is that all about? And what was she doing when she came back?
Yeah, I mean, let's just for a second explore this, right? So there are so many possibilities that we're unaware of, but think about who we are aware of. After she married William in 1937, who would be in Springfield that she would go see? Well, Etta was there. She lived with Etta from roughly 1928 to 1937, working in her home, residing there. So maybe she was going back to visit her. We also know Florence, her daughter, Florence, was in the area. We don't know if she had any contact directly with Florence. However, we did reveal that she knew Florence's last name, that Florence's name appears on your dad's sister's obituary. So that was a huge shocker for us. So we wondered, did she keep up with her somehow? Did she have connection with her? But she was living in Springfield. And then, of course, Angie had followed a thread of some other potential Suarez family who might be in Springfield. So so to our ears to hear that piece of information was just, it set off a lot of sparklers for us.
So how exactly did she travel to Springfield? Do you know? And how
By
often?
train.
Hmm.
I don't know how often. I just know she went by train. She never did get her driver's license.
Okay.
So everywhere she traveled was by cab and train.
Interesting. And I think that you told me, if I remember this correctly, I think that you said that this was not only in his adulthood, like even in his childhood, like all the time she was
Right.
going back to Springfield. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. And that's where,
Interesting.
yeah, that's when the curiosity began. You know, she would never tell him why she was going.
And it sounds like he was naturally inquisitive, but then eventually was trained, right?
Yes.
Be
To be
professionally
curious.
inquisitive.
Right. Right.
And so when he was looking for her, I mean, obviously he knew she was going to Springfield, so he was probably looking for anything in that name, Wilma Estelle. What was her maiden name that she said? It wasn't accurate. Remind
Huffman.
me. Yes. So she would have been looking for something for that Wilma Estelle Huffman in Springfield.
Huffman. Yes. Yes.
Interesting.
Specifically, you know, we were told that there were two sets of twins that were buried.
Yeah.
And we thought perhaps that's where she was going, was back there to visit the graves.
Mhm.
Interesting.
So am I correct that I'm going to say story because we know now that that's not true. Well, we don't think that it's true from what we know, that probably stemmed from him seeing that number 7 on his birth certificate, that he was the seventh living child of her, and that 3 were still alive, I believe is what his certificate. So what that would mean to him, there's Francis, and then there's another alive, and then there were 4 that were not alive. And so then I'm guessing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that then her answer to that was, well, I had 2 sets of twins that didn't survive. Does that sound like?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is speculation, but if she was telling someone about Florence, because Florence's name was on that, she had said that to someone, and Florence was living, I'm guessing that she's counting Florence as the 3rd living. I mean, that would be logical, right?
Yes.
So you're talking that you have then Edward and Franny and Florence, and then she's saying the other. But let's do the math. Okay, so we know those people are real, right? There's those 3. And then we know that there's Mary Rose, and that there's Marie Christine, and that there's the baby Joseph that died. That's only 6. So we still have a
Yes.
missing child somewhere.
Yes, we do.
And it's so hard to know, like, it's just so hard to know what to do with that. Do we go searching, for another child?
Yeah.
I mean, there is quite amount of time between when Marie Christine was born and when she married William, is it possible? Of course it's possible. She had another
Yes.
child that maybe she didn't, maybe she gave up for adoption or something.
Well, I think there's a couple possibilities. So there could be another child, and there's definitely, as you said, years in the timeline. But let's just back up. We know that Mary Rose was a twin, and we know that one died, that we already counted him in there as Joseph. The possibility exists that either Florence or Marie Christine could have been a twin.
It's true.
Agreed.
And I mean, I don't know. I haven't found any proof of that. I'm just saying the possibility exists that could be part of it. Or there also is a many years of gap that it could be included in there.
Yeah.
I've been asked before if I thought she was lying, and I think we've talked about this in a previous episode when we hear so many things that, we think it's this and we find out it's this. And I went through this at first. Then I disbelieved everything that was ever said because I'm like, well, it's all a bunch of lies. But then the more that I investigated, there actually were pieces of truth in all the pieces. And so I,
little
found
bits of truth.
Exactly. Yeah. This is an opinion statement, but in my opinion, I don't think she was lying. I don't see the benefit. I mean, she was already dropping bombs to say 7 children on that birth certificate. What would be the benefit of saying that it was 7 and not 6? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. It's a mystery.
Yeah.
She was a mysterious woman.
Yeah, she was, clearly. And one of the things about Grandma, about Marie Christine, is that we have a copy of her birth record. But when I was, again, we're going back over all these documents and looking closer. And one of the things that I noticed on it is that there's a date of 1983. And what that means is that is a copy of her birth record that she went and retrieved later. She had a copy of the new birth certificate that they gave her when she was adopted that has Noah and Nellie Hickman on it, who are her adoptive parents, which is what they do when a child's adopted. But this was her record with Stella and Christopher. But somebody went and by hand wrote the record in 1983 and sent it to her. She must have requested it. I wonder then if there was a twin, if that would have even been included on the birth record, because we talk about adoption and all that history. I don't want to say being scrubbed, but that's kind of the idea. So if somebody then was sending an adoptee a copy of their birth record, and it is handwritten, I mean, they hand wrote the copy, it's not anything else, then I wonder if they would choose to leave out that information. And that could be, it could be another death at birth, or it could be a live birth, and it could just be another adopted child whose record would also be confidential. And, so I don't know. That's a thread. That's a crazy thread to pull.
That would be wild.
Yeah. But that number 7 just kind of stands out. And like Angie said, why to even put that number on your dad's birth certificate is sort of telling on herself a little bit, right? So then why not tell the truth?
It really is. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was obviously keeping secrets, and she had to for lots of reasons, some of them to which we can speculate on and some of which are her own that we don't know. But the fact that she put that 7, she didn't have to. And I also would be curious to look at Franny's birth certificate and see, did it say 6? Or did she keep it secret and not say anything until number 7? I don't know. But the fact that she put it there means that she was counting. She knew how many children that she had, and she wasn't forgetting any. Even if she had walked away from them, she wasn't forgetting any of them. Yeah. And also that she wanted someone to know. She wanted that written down. Otherwise, why would she have even said that? Yeah. The other piece that's interesting, if it ever came out that Grandma did have a twin, right? Just the other piece that might connect to that possibly. You remember that in the newspaper articles that came out in Springfield, there's the article that talks about being released from the hospital after Florence was born. And then there's the article about being released from the hospital after Marie Christine was born. And then 3 months later, there's another one being released from the hospital that we know couldn't be another 9-month birth, that wasn't time to make all that. So it just makes you, wonder, like, it's just interesting. I wish we could have, I did do a freedom of information requests for medical records, but they did not share. They said they don't have records back that far. That would have been interesting.
Yeah. So Terry, you knew your grandmother. We know her as Stella. We've always known her as Stella. Paul and his family knew her as, well, they didn't know her by the right name either. That's a whole different story. But we know now that they did know her as Stella. Or Estrella was not a name that they knew her by. And then there was
Sylvia.
And Sylvia. Sylvia was another name that they had in mind. But
Sylvia was a new one for me.
yeah. So you knew her as Wilma. Can you describe her? What was she like to you? What do you remember?
Grandma was very elusive, very much unlike my other grandparents, and I longed to have the relationship with her that I did with my other grandparents, but she was not an affectionate woman. I don't remember ever like crawling up on her lap or hugs and kisses when we did see each other, anything of that nature. She was just a very hardened woman.
Yeah.
The one thing I do have a fond memory of is she would always call me Sugar. And every time I hear that song, Sugar, Sugar, it reminds me of her. But that's the one loving memory that I have between us.
Yeah.
Tell us about her. Like, what kind of things did she like to do?
I really can't honestly answer that. Even though I spent years seeing her off and on, I really didn't get close enough to her to know.
Sure.
Yeah.
Other than she cooked. She was a good cook.
We have cooks
She cooked
in the
over
family,
to the
apparently.
school before my grandfather passed away. We do. I am not one of them.
Angie is an amazing cook. My family doesn't starve. That's about where I land on that one. But Angie's a great cook. Oh gosh. Yeah.
So what do you recall, like any famous dish? Like, is there a certain dish, that was like a family favorite that she always made?
When she would come to us, it would be like every other Thanksgiving or every Christmas, and she just kind of helped in the kitchen. But I remember her talking about days of cooking, and, Dad would say she was a great cook when he was growing up. But as far as a specific dish, no.
Yeah.
I really like that. Our grandmother, she was a great cook as well. And I think I mentioned in the episode about her, I just remember her making beef and noodles. Like, she made other things, but that was that was the meal we were going to have when we visited. It was going to be beef and noodles, and we loved it.
She also, like, every visit, but I think every day of their life, she made bacon or sausage and fried eggs every day. Like, so we didn't grow up eating that a lot. So, like, when we would go to visit, like, man, she'd pile on the bacon, and
it was a treat.
Yeah, it was.
It was a treat. Well, Wilma, we know now from all the information that you have shared with us, she had to create a backstory. She had to create a story, and obviously we know that that's not, that those things aren't true. But what she said was that she was from Oklahoma, right? That she was from Oklahoma or born in Oklahoma. That her parents were named John Huffman.
She said that she was born in Oklahoma.
Born in Oklahoma. Okay. That her parents were John Huffman and Rose Marie Leonetti, which is, again, our researcher ears sort of perk up, and we were like, Rose and Marie. Those names reappear a lot. So I don't think that's a coincidence. But that her... Oh, go ahead.
I'm saying it's just interesting, not just that those names appear, right? But, like, again, we've talked before. We learn these facts, and we can't help ourselves but weave kind of a story.
Yeah.
And trying to separate what is actually fact and what is our imagination, piece of that. But my point is that we've thought, well, if she walked away from the family, she must have been, she must have hated them all. She must have been, wanting to look away. But why would she name this fictional mother Rosemary if she hated her? She wouldn't, you know what I mean? She tucked this person in her story, which means actually that there's a fondness and a love there. In my opinion, I'm not a psychologist, but if it was somebody that you hated, you would not create. If you did create them in your story, you'd make them a villain, not someone that you care about. So I just find it very fascinating that she tucked her Rosa right there in her story.
Yeah,
she sure did.
Yeah. I do think it reveals maybe even a longing. Maybe, again, we do wonder about why and circumstances, and we we can never fully know, but it does show that maybe there was a longing, like you said, maybe a fondness, because she didn't have to. She didn't have to, even
Right.
have that connection. She could have chosen something different. But she said her
Well,
family came from Italy. And of course, like I said, we know now that a lot of that isn't true. But what's it like to hear that? Like, what is it like to hear sort of this, to have sort of this unraveling of what you thought? Now, you said you found her to be pretty mysterious. So, but what was that like for us to say, hey, like, here's what we think is true, or here's what we know to be true?
Well, at first it was disturbing to me.
Sure.
I had felt that she had been very dishonest with me, which she had.
Sure.
But it's very interesting, and it's kind of a relief to me to finally get some answers,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And at first I was wishing that Dad were still alive to be able to hear these answers, but I totally believe in God's perfect timing, and I know it wasn't meant to be. And I think he would be very hurt if he knew the
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had that same conversation about our grandmother, and
mhm.
also believe in God's providence, and that his timing is perfect. And I wonder, Angie, I don't know how you feel about it, but I just really wonder. It brings resolution to us. It brings something new to us, but I don't know that it would have helped my grandmother to know all of the details.
Yeah.
It's much more personal to her, but I don't know how you feel about that, Angie.
Yeah, it's hard to know, how that would be have been received. Terry, you said that your father passed away just a few short weeks before we connected.
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you really were processing lots of things at once, right? The death of your father and all the things related to that, and then all of a sudden this whole new family that has just landed on your on your doorstep, and understanding a whole new history. That's just a lot to hold in one space of time.
You guys have been a blessing.
Hmm.
I was thinking secrets are hard to keep, right? And some people are better at keeping secrets than others. I think of my son Levi. He's in college now, but when he was little, he was Mr. Christmas. He loved every bit about it, and he wanted to be the first one with the present underneath the tree for his family. But this kid could not keep a secret to save his life. It just bubbled out of every orifice of his body. He just couldn't contain himself, and he was so excited about it. And I just think, you know, um, obviously these kind of secrets are not ones that you're excited to have bubble out, but they do bubble, or they ooze, right? They come out in different ways, like the birth certificate that shares a little bit, like the obituary that shares a little bit, because it is hard to keep those in. And actually, when you're keeping a secret, it always is at the top of your mind. It rises up. And so part of me would
Mhm.
like to be able to meet Stella and be able to just say, let's pop the bubble, right? There's no need to keep the secret. And also, when you're trying so hard to keep the secret, you have to keep everybody else out, because you can't let anything get too close to that. And so it would just be very interesting to be able to say, um, you don't have to keep a secret any longer. Like here it is, release you from that, and also release us from that, right? Like it's interesting.
It had to be a burden,
Yeah.
to
Yes.
carry so many secrets and
Yeah.
try to keep everything straight.
Hey, I give her props. That she kept it pretty straight. Like, as far as we can
She
tell.
did. Yeah, she did a good job.
Especially because, well, I mean, we're making an assumption, but especially because throughout her marriage with William, it appears she did not completely disconnect, from someone in Springfield. So that would be hard to maintain. That would be hard to keep up for sure.
Do you think he knew anything?
You know, she was always talking about this Walter,
Uh-huh.
and constantly, every time I would see her, she would be talking about this Walter, and it would be in front of my grandfather.
Mm.
And I always felt so sad for him that she was doing this. And, we still don't know who Walter is or was.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know how much he knew and how much he didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a super understanding guy, I can tell you that.
Well, he would have had to have been.
Yeah.
Let's unpack this Walter thing, because I don't think we've talked about
Yes.
this on the podcast yet. I don't think
No.
we've this yet. So you shared with us that you just go ahead and explain to us. What did she say about Walter, about who Walter was? Give us the picture of that.
In my mind, listening to her speak, Walter was her former husband who had passed away. And she talked about what a grand life she had with Walter. And, he would shower her with gifts and just such a terrific guy. And, it left me wondering. It left me wondering with a lot of questions. So I always thought that Walter was the father of the two sets of twins that supposedly had passed away at birth.
Yeah.
Now we know that that is not true.
Yeah.
Right. So what did she say about Walter? She said that he died before she married.
Before she met Papa, my grandfather. Yes.
And did she say where they lived? Was it Springfield?
I assumed it was Springfield, but that was just a little girl's assumption, I guess.
Right. Well, we have spent a lot of time digging into this as soon as you mentioned Walter. And I can't say for sure whether he did or did not exist, but here are the things that we tried. First of all, we look at the timeline, and there wasn't a lot of room because we had her as this been made from 1928 to 1937, or at least late 36, and then she married. I started to say Edward. It's not Edward.
William.
It's William. She married William in
Bravo.
1937. Yes, in 1937. There's not room for another spouse in there. Not
Right.
easily understood. And again, this is an assumption, but while she's as a live-in maid, it's hard to conceive that she could have been married at the same time, But we did a lot of looking, trying to see, was there somebody else? Was there a gap in there or whatever? But here's the thing that struck Cindy and I when we talked about this. She talks about this grand life and, and being showered, like you said, showered with gifts and, not having to worry about money and all that kind of thing. And that, of course, contrasts the life that she had with William, because they did struggle, right? They were
every life she had, it contrasts.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Every life she ever had was always about that struggle.
Yeah.
So it almost seems like this kind of fantastical, like imaginary thing, right? A life where you never have to worry. Except that someone pointed out, I think it was my mom, somebody pointed out that the life that she had with Etta, even though she was a live-in servant, it would have been a little bit more fantastical like that. She wouldn't have had to worry about food. She would have been learning about, she would have just seen a different lifestyle. And again, we don't know exactly what her role was there, but think about it. This woman she was very wealthy. Her husband was deceased by this point, but they had owned this huge furniture store in Springfield, had lots of resource, in that regard. So what would the person in the house, they would have been like arranging for social events. She would have known the fine china, and she would have known, the proper way to lay it out. She would have known the way to prepare the food. I wonder if she did some cooking there, as well.
Right.
And she wouldn't have had in that life, in the preparing the things that she did for Etta, she wouldn't have had to worry. And again, you think about, she had that life. And then when she left that, for whatever reason that she left it, then all of a sudden now she's back into a life where she has a little bit more struggle. What a contrast those two things would be, right? During the Depression, even never having to worry about things like that. And then all of a sudden a life where you did have to worry about it. It almost seems like a fantastical way to describe that. But of course she couldn't, this is my speculation, but she couldn't say, well, I was a live-in maid and, household servant and had access to this. So instead I create this, this husband. Right. But what she's really talking about is less about the person and more about the life.
Yeah.
It's just speculation, but that's what it makes me wonder.
Well, I've often wondered too. She always wore this ring with 4 diamonds in it. She always told me, someday this is going to be yours. And I do have it now. And I always wondered where it really truly came from. It's got 4 diamonds. So I thought it was Papa, her, Franny, and Dad.
Yeah.
But there's no way. I mean, they did not have 2 nickels to rub together. So I really don't know the origin of this ring.
That's interesting. Have you verified that they are real?
Yes.
Interesting.
I don't know of anyone in her life
No,
who would have been able to provide her with that. So
interesting.
No.
And she never sold it, so it's not like it was something that she,
No, she treasured it.
Yeah. Interesting.
And she always had it on every time I saw her, and every time she'd say, someday, honey, this will be yours, and
Wow. Yeah. I mean, and we have explored all these possibilities. Walter was a real person, but the rest is fantasy, because we know she never lived that life, that Walter's not real and it's a fantasy, Yeah, we just don't know. We haven't found any viable record of Walter anywhere. So, but then we've learned time will tell. Like
another scenario, and I think mom's the one that threw this out. Somebody threw it out to me. Was that, is it possible that she had an affair with someone while she was living in Springfield during those 7 or 8 years? Because again, she would have had contact with a lot of people who had means. All the other people who were coming in the home, right, would have been of a similar lifestyle to Etta. And so, there's a possibility that she had a relationship with someone there.
Sure.
The other thing is, we have her in Springfield. You've heard this said many times, from 28 to late 36. There are a few holes in there. And I was trying to look up and see before this episode, I didn't get it done, what the years were. But there's 1 or 2 city directories that throughout those 8 years that she did not show up on there. And again, initially, I just viewed that as, well, city directories aren't perfect. They're just, it is what it is. But it does make me wonder, was there a period where she left and then came back? I'm also wondering, were those 2 years back to back, or separated out? And I'm not sure. The problem is, my mom did that research. We did that in person in Springfield, and she kept a little notebook, and she's not able to find the notebook. We're looking forward to see. She probably tucked it somewhere in her desk, or we'll go back to Springfield and look
someplace
again.
safe.
Yeah. But I'm just curious. It just makes me wonder if there's a gap there. Maybe she did leave for a little while and came back, and I don't know.
It's possible. So, Terry, one other kind of a fun connection for us is that Ryan is your son. And poor Ryan, our whole podcast, he has been getting called out. And I will tell you, when was it last episode, we sort of revealed, last couple episodes, we revealed that we had contact with Ryan, and, we're making these connections, and our followers were very excited for us, commenting that they were like, "Yay, Ryan!" And couldn't wait. So everybody was kind of cheering that on. We know that he was unaware of the messages Angie was sending for a long time, just because he wasn't logging on, and then one day circumstances he opened it up and found out. How does he feel it? Like, what's what's his perspective on all of this?
So after I listened to the last podcast, I texted and I said, "Hey, just want to let you know you're a hero."
That's right. For sure.
Well, Ryan's as excited about this as I am.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm sure it's surreal.
I mean, it's so funny to think about, and even to listen to us talk about what we think this, this out there DNA match, what we thought it was going to mean, and what we thought it was going to lead to, and how big we thought it was going to be. And we kept saying that we think this is just going to be big, and if we could just get this person. And then when we made the connection, it was. I mean, it was that big of a deal. And so we're really glad that Ryan created the account and the tree and put the information out there so that we could even make that connection.
And hey, listen. Over these years of searching, okay, I have been searching literally the globe, right? From Spain to California and everywhere in between, thinking, where could she have gone? Every scenario I could have possibly thought of, only to learn that everything was right here in our backyard. And when we finally connected with Ryan, so his profile on Ancestry says he's from LA. So again, I'm digging into LA, and I knew there was an LA connection. I knew there was a California connection with Louisa. So I kept thinking maybe she went out there, trying to figure all that out. Come to find out, Ryan graduated the same university that my husband works at. This is just so wild. It's all right here. Yes. So the world was not as big. We're casting this huge net, but actually everything was right here in our backyard.
Yeah. It all keeps coming back to Illinois. Even for our great grandfather, Christopher, searching has also gone to California and to Arizona and all this, but I don't know. I have a feeling like in the end, we're going to find him back in Illinois. Like, I think it just keeps coming back. So
Christopher's another whole beast.
Yeah. Christopher's a whole other thing.
Actually, we'll talk more about this later, but I'm pretty sure Christopher's the one that taught her how to assume a new identity, but we'll talk about that
Yeah,
later.
I think that's true. So we had the opportunity to gather with you in person. Angie, myself, our mom, Chris, and Paul was there as well, and his wife Kathy joined us. And you were such a good sport to just say, "Yeah, I'm willing to come meet all these strangers." Like, we were so grateful. So what was it like to sit at that table and I'm related to these people. These are cousins and second
Two
cousins.
first cousins are at the table.
Yeah,
It was amazing.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I've grown up an only child, and my mom was an only child, and we had very limited family. And, I'm one of the last. And so I've always wished I had cousins. And I sat at that table and I looked around and I'm like, wow, this is surreal,
Yeah, yeah,
but I'm truly blessed that it's you guys.
yeah,
Yeah, you have a room full of cousins now.
yeah.
I do.
There's
And
a
more
lot.
out there probably.
Yeah. And for whatever we've talked before about, trying not to judge choices made that, we none of us can fully understand. We can try. We can try to learn and to know the details and to know context and try to consider what life was like, for women and mothers and all of that. And we just try to hold all of this to know the story without judging. Sometimes it's hard, to be honest. But and for us in particular, hard
It
not
is
to
hard.
judge. Yeah, both for us, both our great grandmother and our great grandmother, it's hard not to
Right.
judge their choices. But in the end, we have a great reward because of those choices, good or bad. We have been able to connect with amazing people who are our family, and so I also feel like it's a blessing to get to meet you and to be connected, meet with Paul. It's just been wonderful for us too, and for our mom.
Yeah, and we've just been mindful that for us, researching my grandmother's story, and even for Paul, researching his grandmother's story, has been about abandonment, right? Like because both of those families were left behind, and there's all kinds of feelings that go with that. But you actually have a different
Yeah,
emotion. At least I can suppose that the emotion is different, and I think from talking to you, the emotion is different. More betrayal, because again, because this is. Because she didn't leave behind your family. You knew her, you knew her all the way through. You knew everything. Well, I shouldn't say everything about her, but you know a lot about her, and knew her personality and those kind of things. And then to find this information out, it's just both emotions are very valid. Both of them are true, but they are different, right? Like how you are processing it is different than how we are processing it for that exact reason.
Right.
There's some biblical truth, about, well, there's a couple ways to phrase it, but the tangled web we weave
yeah,
when we practice to deceive.
Yeah.
The point is, we teach this to our kids and to our, grandchildren and people that we come in contact with. When you tell lies, when you keep secrets, when you have mistruths, there are long-term consequences that,
That's right.
she obviously understood some of them, but she didn't understand how this affected other people who were connected to the story.
Exactly. I mean, no clue, from the grave.
Yeah.
yeah. And she may not have even been able to recognize the truth of what it did to her as well. There's a sense of the era where things weren't talked about as much, feelings weren't explored as much, maybe didn't know enough about generational trauma and the impact that can have for future generations. There's a lot there, but I think about the impact of shame. And I wonder if, I'm not declaring this, but I do wonder if a lot of the choices and even some of the things that you've described about her personality, if a lot of that comes from carrying shame, shame of leaving for whatever reason, but a shame of leaving children, leaving lives for whatever reason. Shame, the only remedy for it really is to bring it out in the open. Bringing it out in the open is what
Right.
actually resolves it. And I know she didn't get that in her lifetime. I wish, like Angie said earlier, I wish she had been able to have that release, because I think she would find a lot more love. She could have been opened up to a lot more possibilities Maybe if she had told Edward the truth, he may have found all of us before before we went this route.
Right.
You never know. But I think shame weighs on people, and I think it makes it very difficult to connect relationally to other people
It's a lot to carry.
it is a lot to
It
carry.
is a lot.
Yeah.
I wonder, thinking back now when she was passing, when I was sitting there and just what was going through her mind
Sure.
at that time, you
Mhm.
Yeah.
know.
You told me one story, Terry, once about visiting her when you were a little bit older, like a teenager,
Mm-hmm.
and a story about her and you seeing her interact with another small child. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yes, I feel kind of silly because I was a teenager and probably should not have had those juvenile feelings, but I didn't get the relationship that I wanted with her, and all of a sudden she is babysitting this small child, and the little bit of time we spent together, she's just always talking about this child. So one day when she was babysitting, I popped over there and met this little girl, and um, sweetest little thing ever. But I felt some jealousy,
Sure.
like grandma's holding on to her and never happened with me.
Yeah.
And later on, after all this, I just can't help but wonder if there was a familial connection there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, it, it was just so out of character for her.
Sure.
It is interesting to see that see it later in her life, her interacting with children differently than she did all the way,
Yes, this
right?
was much later. This was much later in life. I would say it was probably the last 3 years of her life.
Mhm.
That's interesting.
And I don't think we can discount the healing that could have come over time. Whatever it was that caused her to leave Emilio and Mary Rose, and then eventually Christopher and Florence and Marie, whatever that was, she didn't leave William and Edward
Right.
and Franny. She so something had changed, whether it was time or whatever it was, because we don't know exactly what caused her to leave in those circumstances. I mean, we're learning as we're hearing different things from family. We're sort of putting some pieces of the puzzle together that shape a potential story. But, we can't know without actually having the conversation with her. So then it makes me wonder about children. Was there trauma that actually caused her difficulty in connecting with young children, in feeling a connection? But that over time, eventually Franny and Edward, she raised them. She had relationship to some degree with them. And then, maybe toward the end of her life, whatever it was that made that challenging for her, maybe it had healed some. It's possible.
I hope so.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Me too.
Is there something now that has changed? Like, has your perspective on Wilma changed? As obviously you had the immediate sort of feeling like, you lied to me. I didn't, what, like, we,
Mhm.
I could have known, you could have told me. Has your perspective on any of that changed as this
Right.
story is being revealed? And let me say, it's still being revealed because we're still learning about it. We're not handing you a finished story.
Right. It has changed. At first I was very hurt and felt very deceived.
Mhm.
But as the story is unwinding, um, I'm trying to find some grace in it. There's got to be a reason why she did the things that she did, and
Yes.
I'm just kind of holding on to that.
Yes.
Well, is there anything that you want to just say about your grandmother, Wilma, Estrella, Stella, whatever name that you knew her by, that you haven't had a chance to say yet? Is something you just want to say about her?
I just hope that in the end she was able to find peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Like, I hope if she has any awareness of her family right now, I hope that she knows that there is a sense of compassion and love. Even for those of us who don't know her, we find the compassion to have a sense of love for this woman who we're trying to understand, and we may never. And we know that people have been hurt, but that is a reality of our human condition, and living in relationship. But we have beautiful people that we can connect with and share with and carry that together with, and then just do life with. Like
Right.
that I think is a wonderful
Absolutely.
gift. So I hope.
I think
hope
Grandma would be very surprised that she's the center of attention in all of this.
people are
Fair,
finding her to
fair.
be a very interesting woman.
Yeah. Terry, thank you. Thank you genuinely
Thank
for your
you.
time, for your honesty, for trusting us with your dad's memory. It means everything to us.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. And we want to end this episode with something that we have been intentionally holding on to, and Terry has been helping us do that. But it's something we're going to talk more about next week when our mom, Chris, is going to join us. But we cannot leave this episode without revealing this.
The bombshell.
Yes, this piece of information. When Estrella, going by Wilma Estelle, and I'm saying Estelle, but I actually saw on her death certificate it says Estella, which is interesting. But Wilma Estelle Nelson, when she married William in 1937, they built a life together, and they had 2 children, Francis, and then Terry's father, Edward. And they lived together in a town in west central Illinois. But it was not Springfield. They did not live in Springfield.
And it was a town where around the same year, 1937 is when she married him, right?
Yes.
Around that same year, a little girl named Norma Jean Hickman had also just moved.
Yes.
She was 9 years old. Her adoptive father had just passed away, and she and her mother and her grandmother sold their farm and moved into town.
Yes. So listeners know that Norma Jean Hickman is our grandmother. She was born Marie Christine DeBoard, is Stella's daughter. And really, for the rest of her life, for decades, she wondered about her birth mother. It pained her. It was a burden that she carried. Hired a private investigator. She searched, left documents for us, never actually found her. But
she and Estrella were living in the same town.
In the same town. And not for a short period of time, for decades. They lived together in Macomb, Illinois.
They are both buried in the same town.
And they are both buried in the same town. Yes.
Wild.
So this opens up so many questions. But next week, our mom, Marie Christine's daughter, is going to join us, and we're gonna talk together about living in Macomb, growing up there, and then this new information, knowing that her mom searched, but also that the person that she was searching for was very, very, very close, and we're going to explore that a little bit. So next time on Buried Threads.
Until then, keep pulling that thread.
Thanks for listening. If you're walking your own search through DNA, silence, or a name you can't quite place, you're not alone.
If you want to go deeper on this story, you can find us on Substack at buriedthreads.substack.com. That's where we release every episode, along with documents, photos, and the kind of details that don't always make it into the audio.
You can also find and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And if you haven't yet, subscribing or leaving a review makes a real difference in helping other people find us.
For more photos, recap videos, polls, and the occasionally chaotic behind-the-scenes moments, find us on Facebook and Instagram. We're at Buried Threads.
And if something we've shared has stirred something in your own family story, we really do want to hear it. Reach out. You might be surprised where a single thread leads.
Until next time, keep pulling the thread.
Just knowing she existed. She was real. She had a name.